Everyone is doing well. Thank you, Dawn. Hi, everybody. My name is Eric Cuello. I am the Director of Community Affairs for the Manhattan Borough President, Mark Levine. If I haven't seen you yet on one of these trainings, it's good to have you here. We are joined by Porfirio Figueroa, who is the Deputy Director of Community Affairs and who makes this entire leadership training series happen. So I want to give him a shout out and thank you, as well to Don Billings, our CAU administrator, who makes sure that we are here on Zoom, have our guests who are our presenters who are participating with us, and having all of you here. I think I'll pass it to Porfirio in just a moment to do introductions for our presenter. But just really quickly, wanted to thank folks again for being here. This is now session number, I want to say 6 of our leadership training series out of 8 that we will be having for this year. Um, if you have missed any of them, they will be on our YouTube channel probably in the next week or two. So just stay tuned. We'll be sure to share that out with all the boards. And yeah, with that, I think I will pass it to Porfirio. Just one plug that I will make for tomorrow's trainings. So specifically for one of the trainings that we have, I think it's incredibly important for our boards who work so much with our community members. It's going to be a training on how to navigate the DOB and HPD portals. I feel like so many times we come across someone who is dealing with a landlord issue or wants to know more about a development that's happening near their child's school or you name it. This is going to be a really good resource for folks either to, in real time join it or watch it afterwards to learn a little bit more about how to safely or properly navigate that site. So with that plug, I will pass it over to Porfirio for today's.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Dawn, and thank you, Xavier, for being here as well. This leadership training series is created for tools for our new and current and existing members, so that you have the options to help you in your meetings and how you create resos, etc. I think today's series specifically kind of piggybacks off of one we had yesterday, which was combating implicit bias. Where we learned by overriding bias, we needed to slow down, extend a little grace and patience on decision making, and find ways to belong, respect, invest in each other, and continue conversations in kindness. And with that said, EEO does that, but with parameters. Um, Xavier Medina, who is our speaker tonight, is a constituent services liaison for the Manhattan Borough President's Office at our Northern office, as well as one of the EEO officers for our office. His experience is heavily socially based, with several years of experience in assisting refugees and asylum seekers. And he does this specifically and through and at our Northern office, which is a great asset for us all. So we are very excited that we actually have one of our own doing this series today. Xavier Medina, take it away.
Wow, that was a wonderful introduction. Thank you very much. First, before we begin, just please excuse me as I'm a bit under the weather. So my camera will be off for this presentation. So I just ask for your grace as we go through this presentation. So we'll be discussing the Equal Employment Opportunity Training. I am your EEO officer. My name is Xavier Medina. So I just want to say that again for everyone. My name is Xavier Medina, and I am your EEO officer. No matter if you are a volunteer, no matter if you are an employee, if you just work with the community boards, for everyone here, and we'll talk about the word everyone, I am your EEO officer. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. There we go. So here are some of the objectives that we're going to go over. We're going to go over diversity and inclusion, what that means, who that applies to. We're going to talk about the we're going to talk about the different levels of laws and how whether it's the state law, the city law, or federal laws that provide specific protections to our EEO policy. We're going to talk a bit more about the details of the EEO policy and what to do if you feel that the policy has been violated, whether it's something that you've observed or something that's happened directly to you. We're going to talk a bit more about the sexual harassment policies, as well as some of our human rights laws and other avenues that help maintain the EEO policies in the workplace. And then we're just going to talk about our office and who you can reach out to, who's a part of that EEO team. I ask that you save all questions for the end. We'll have a brief Q&A session. All right, so I mentioned everyone, and who is everyone? So as the slide says, no two people are the same. Diversity is the inclusion of people who are different, and everyone includes within as broad as a concept as that word can be, truly everyone when it pertains to the EEO policy. So that goes for our volunteers, our interns, our supervisors, our per diem employees, our full-time employees, our part-time employees. Whether or not they're on the payroll, this policy applies to them. We want to make sure that the workplace is inclusive and safe and equitable for everyone, regardless of their relationship to the workplace, regardless of their relationship to the community board or to the Manhattan Borough President's office. This policy applies to everyone, even if they're just, for example, a constituent visiting the office. The EEO policy applies to them as well. So there will never be an occasion where you'll hear your EEO team, whether it's myself or the deputy EEO officer, say, oh, the EEO policy doesn't apply to them. It absolutely applies to everyone, and it's a very broad term that we use for this policy. So what is equal employment opportunity? So equal employment opportunity exists when decisions, practices, and procedures relating to the workplace are made in a way that gives everyone a chance to succeed. So we want to make sure that there is an equal playing ground for everyone. We want to make sure that no one has any unfair advantages or unfair disadvantages in the workplace. And that applies to whether or not there's a reasonable accommodation for someone who has who's differently abled, or ensuring that everyone is treated the same regardless of their race or religion. We want to ensure that everyone is in the workplace in an equitable environment. So on the bottom, it says EEO laws prohibit an employer from discriminating against persons in all aspects of employment, including recruitment, selection, evaluation, promotion, training, compensation, retention, and working conditions because of their protected status. So we're gonna talk a bit more about protected status and what that means. But as you can see, that sentence goes quite on. Recruitment, selection, evaluation, promotion, training, etc. It's applies to everyone, and it applies throughout all scopes of the workplace. So whether or not you're in the office, whether or not you're traveling with a coworker going somewhere else, the EEO policy is for everyone and is always in effect. So discrimination, let's talk about what discrimination is. So discrimination, as stated here, is unfavorable or unfair treatment of a person or class of persons in comparison to others who are not members of a protected class. Retaliation for opposition to discriminatory practices, complaining about prohibited conduct, or participating in the EEO complaint, investigation, or reasonable accommodation process. So discrimination is when you're being treated unfavorable, unfairly, poorly, not as well compared to others based off of a protected class. And we'll talk a bit more about protected classes, but to make it easier to understand, a protected class is a descriptor about yourself. So it could be your race, your religion, it could be your credit history, it could be whether or not you are a pregnant person or not. These are types of protected classes. And if you're being treated differently, poorly because of that protected class, then that is something that constitutes as discrimination. And that is an example of something that is a violation of the EEO policy, something that the EEO policy works to prevent from happening. Harassment. So harassment is the use of vulgar language, abusive acts, language, hostility, physical aggression, or intimidation. And this also includes sexual harassment, which is related to a person's protected class. So I think everyone is relatively familiar with the term harassment. It's something that we hear pretty regularly in our everyday lives, whether it's on the news or on social media. Harassment, unfortunately, is something that happens in the workplace as well. And the EEO policy definitely works to prevent that from happening and to create plans to, should it ever happen, to prevent it from reoccurring. And then retaliation. So behaviors that may be considered retaliatory include, but are not limited to, threats, reprimands, negative evaluations, harassment, refusal to hire, denial of promotion or job benefits, demotion, suspension, discharge, negative references to prospective employers, or the actions affecting the terms, conditions, or privileges of employment. So we mentioned harassment in the EEO policy because we want to make sure that should a complaint ever be filed and an investigation begin, that employee, that intern, that constituent, whoever that person is, that everyone person is safe from any forms of retaliation from either a supervisor or anyone in a supervisory role or someone in another role that may be parallel to theirs. So federal anti-discrimination laws and protections. So these are examples of protected classes. So these are some of the things I mentioned earlier, such as race and color, military status, citizenship, religion, sex, genetic information, age, disability. These are protected classes that ensure you cannot be discriminated against these specific categories under the federal law. Now, throughout this presentation, we're breaking down the protected classes by the levels of government. So we talk about which protected classes are protected under the federal laws, which protected classes are protected under the state laws, and which protected classes are protected under the city laws. However, I do not want you to focus on which law protects which class. That is not the important part here. What's most important for me is that everyone here has a solid understanding of what a protected class is so that you can recognize when you're being discriminated against or if you observe discrimination based off of a protected class. This list can change, laws are, especially now, laws are changing very quickly. So this list may not be exhaustive or this list may not be the most updated right now. I'm gonna have to double check this with our EEO team. However, if you feel that a protected class is being used to discriminate in your workplace, please consult us. We don't expect you to have this list memorized. We don't expect you to become an expert in the EEO policy, but we want you to have a general understanding of what these protected classes are so that should there be a time of question, should there be a time of uncertainty, you can come to myself, your EEO officer, or your deputy EEO officer, Maite Carino, who's also in the Manhattan Borough President's Office, to discuss further. And we can figure out what happened if there was a potential for an EEO policy violation and what the best next steps are in that case. So again, here are some examples of some protected classes being race and color, age, sex, gender, pregnancy, military status, and citizenship. So New York State human rights law. New York State anti-discrimination protections are contained in Section 296 of the New York State Executive Law, referred to as the New York State Human Rights Law. New York State labor law. Nursing mothers have a right to express milk in a private place for up to 3 years following the birth of a child. So this also falls under EEO. For those that are nursing, if they're being treated poorly or differently, discriminated against because of the nursing activities that they have to do while working, that is another protected class. And this is something that falls under state law. So just so that you can see that difference of how different classes are protected under different levels of law. That's not important. That's not the point of this presentation. The point of the presentation is for you to have an idea of what these protected classes are. So for those that are nursing, that is an additional protected class. And here are some additional protected classes under state law. So arrest and conviction, sexual orientation, and victims or survivors of domestic violence. So these are additional examples of protected classes. And then we have New York City's human rights laws contain all of the following above. So all of the protections by state and federal laws, in addition to partnership status, unemployment status, caregiver status, and consumer credit history. So these are additional protected classes that cannot be used to, excuse me, that cannot be used to give you unfavorable or advantageous treatment at work. So the New York City Equal Employment Opportunity Policy. The policy is available for everyone. It's available for anyone to see at this link provided. If you ever want to see the policy, please reach out to me. The policy has been emailed to all of our community boards, not too recently. However, if you would like another copy of it, if you want more copies, I have no problem sharing out the policy with you guys. That is for your use. That is a tool for you guys to use and to become familiar with. So please feel free to reach out to me or anyone else on the EEO team should you need access to the Equal Employment Opportunity Policy. And it's also available on New York City's, on DCAS's website. All right, so the New York City EEO policy prohibits discriminatory actions against and treatment of city employees and applicants for employment on the basis of actual or perceived, and we have a list of our protected classes. So this is extremely important, and I want to emphasize this for everyone here. Whether or not someone actually belongs to a protected class does not matter. What matters is if they're being treated in a discriminatory manner because that person believes them to be a part of that protected class. That I felt that was wordy. So let me provide an example for you. So if we have someone who is being perceived as being a part of the LGBT community, they're being perceived as queer of some sort, and they're being treated differently by their supervisor, they're being treated poorly by their supervisor, that is considered discrimination, whether or not that person identifies with the LGBT community or not. So that applies to all of them. If someone is being treated differently because their supervisor or their colleague perceives them to be pregnant, that is a violation of the EEO policy, whether or not that person is actually pregnant. So it doesn't matter if you actually belong to any of these protected classes. What matters is if you're being treated differently because you're being perceived to belong to these protected classes. All right, so who is covered by the city's EEO policy? Everyone who works within New York City government or its workplaces or job applicants. And yes, that includes our CB members and staff. So again, we put emphasis on this word, everyone. So, and even here, I feel this is a bit constrained because you don't necessarily need to be on payroll for this to apply to you. If you are an unpaid intern, an unpaid volunteer, if you were just a customer walking in, this EEO policy applies to you. Our teams are protected regardless of their relation to the workplace. So types of conduct that could violate the city's EEO policy. Decisions, actions, or practices based on an individual's actual or perceived status that unlawfully affects the terms or conditions of their employment or potential employment within the city of New York. The policy also prohibits city employees from aiding, abetting, inciting, compelling, or coercing any person present in a city facility, whether or not an employee of the city, from engaging in any conduct prohibited by the EEO policy, including conduct that creates a hostile work environment based on any protected bases. So you cannot convince someone else to do your dirty work for you. That is still a violation of the EEO policy. If someone else is being coerced to treat you poorly or coerced to provide you disadvantageous work environments, that is still a violation of the EEO policy. So what that could look like is if a supervisor is instructing someone they supervise to create the schedule and provide, unfavorable work hours continuously for the same person because of a protected class. So that person creating the schedule may not um, may not be doing it because they want to, but they're being coerced by their supervisor to do it because of whatever biases that exist. So even if there's some sort of middle person, that is still a violation of the EEO policy. And these things, like I said, can always be discussed in further detail. Again, I will say we aren't expecting you guys to be experts in the policy and experts in how this policy applies to every different situation. We found that, EEO potential EEO policy violations can be quite complex and can involve several different people and several different witnesses, for example. So leave the investigation process to us. However, if you feel that there is a potential of you being discriminated against because of a characteristic that you have that's a protected class, just talk to us and then we can do sort of that heavy lifting to figure out what's going on. So now let's also talk about the extensions of the workplace. And you have listed here field locations, offsite, city social functions, city vehicles, facilities where city government is being conducted and discussed. So if work is taking place, the EEO policy applies. Whether or not that work is taking place in your main office, in your satellite office, if it's taking place at out in the field, at a community event, or at a nonprofit's office, the EEO policy applies. It also applies to events where you may not necessarily be on the clock, for example. So if you're having a an end of the year celebration for a colleague who's retiring, for example, that EEO policy will still apply. Wherever city government work is being done, the EEO policy is going to apply. All right, so managers and supervisors' responsibilities. So managers and supervisors, pay attention. The city's EEO policy requires that managers and supervisors make every effort to maintain a work environment that fosters sensitivity and respect for the diversity of all the individuals in the workplace. Managers and supervisors must be aware of risk factors and take appropriate steps to prevent sexual harassment. And these responsibilities can include cooperating with your EEO team, receiving training in your EEO laws, encourage subordinates to consult with the EEO office and maintain confidentiality with respect to EEO matters. So it's fairly common that should an investigation be initiated or should someone come to us with a EEO concern, that we reach out to supervisors for some additional context. And it may not be specifically relating to the EEO violation potentially, but it could just be clarification on policies that happen in the office or how the office is normally run. That is the type of cooperation that we expect from supervisors. We want them to be communicative with us, open with us about what that environment is like. Because your EEO team is fairly removed from you guys, we don't interact with you guys on a daily basis. You don't hear from us pretty frequently unless there's a training happening or some sort of broad announcement is happening regarding these trainings. You guys can forget that we exist. I think that's pretty reasonable that you forget we're here as a resource. So I think it's natural for teams to reach out to their supervisors first when they feel that there's some sort of discrimination happening in the workplace. We need the supervisors and managers to encourage your teams and your subordinates to reach out to your EEO team. Please do not hold on to that information. Don't wait for things to, naturally get better. I've observed that they normally don't. Please, be proactive with this. If you receive some sort of EEO complaint or any complaint that has EEO implications, encourage that person to reach out to us directly, or you can reach out to us on their behalf. But please do not hold on to that information. That never, ever helps the scenario. So important note, the city and its agencies may discipline conduct that violates the city's EEO policy, even if the conduct does not violate a law prohibiting discrimination. Actions directed at a particular person or group or behavior directed at one's own group may violate this policy. So just because something may not be illegal per se, doesn't mean it doesn't violate the EEO policy. if it's a violation of the EEO policy, it could incur disciplinary action. And that disciplinary action could look very different depending on the case. So this concept or this idea of, well, I didn't break any laws, I didn't do anything illegal, doesn't apply when it comes to EEO. These policies they still stand regardless whether or not you broke any, any laws. The policy not only protects individuals from prohibited conduct because of their own protected status, but also protects individuals from conduct motivated by the actual perceived status of those with whom they are associated. So again, you could receive discrimination, one, because you're being perceived as something that you may not necessarily be. And two, you also could receive discrimination because of who you associate with. So even if you don't apply to that protected class, if you are being grouped in that discrimination because of your association or because you're on the team of someone or because someone feels that you are particularly friendly in the workplace with someone else and you become grouped in and receive discrimination, that is also a violation of the EEO policy. And that is definitely something that you could bring to our attention as well for further discussion. So sexual harassment. So sexual harassment is a form of discrimination prohibited by law. We all just recently finished our sexual harassment training, so we should all be pretty well versed in sexual harassment prevention. So federal guidelines describe sexual harassment as unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical contact. Sexual harassment may involve individuals of the same or different gender. A broad range of behaviors may be considered sexual harassment. So sexual harassment, as stated here, plainly is a form of discrimination, and that is why it falls under the EEO policy. So quid pro quo, this for that. Submission to or rejection of the conduct, submission to or rejection of the conduct is the basis for either continued employment or for decisions affecting pay, benefits, or advancement opportunities. So this is often in tandem with sexual harassment, where quid pro quo, meaning this for that, applies. So an example of this would be if a supervisor tells their subordinate, I will consider you for this bonus if you go on a date with me. So that type of bartering is a violation of the EEO policy. That is something that absolutely should be brought to your EEO team's attention, myself and Maite, and we can discuss further what's happening and how we can correct those types of behaviors. But this is within that realm of sexual harassment. This is a particular theme within sexual harassment for EEO. So other forms of harassment. The city's EEO policy prohibits any harassment based on an individual's gender or any other protected characteristics such as race, color, religion, national origin, age, disability, marital status, sexual orientation, etc. For harassment to be considered unlawful, it must be all of the following. Related to a protected class, unwelcome, offensive to a reasonable person in the recipient's position, when a person is treated less well than other employees based on a protected category, and the conduct is not a petty slight or a trivial inconvenience. All right, so let's talk about a hostile work environment. The conduct has the purpose or effect of unreasonably interfering with an individual's work performance. It creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. So I think hostile work environment is a term that everyone in this call is familiar with. Sorry, bear with me for one moment. My computer's freezing up on me. One moment, guys. Can someone on the panel just confirm that you guys can still see my screen?
I see your screen and it says filing a complaint.
It says filing a complaint right now?
Correct.
Okay, great. All right, so let's talk about the complaint process and what that's like. So in the event, and let's all really hope that this does not happen, that you feel you're being treated differently, you're being discriminated against, or there's some sort of sexual harassment happening because of a characteristic or one of your protected classes, and you need to file a complaint. An employee or applicant for employment can file a complaint or consult with the agency EEO officer, EEO representative, a manager, or supervisor. So you can reach out to any of those listed persons in order to submit a complaint. If you submit a complaint to a manager or supervisor, managers and supervisors forward that to your EEO team. Do not hold on to it. Ultimately, your EEO complaint should find its way to the EEO team, your EEO officer being myself, Xavier Medina, and your deputy EEO officer, Maite Carino. So filing a complaint. Complaints can be filed against a manager, a supervisor, a coworker, an independent contractor, a consultant, or a vendor. Complaints can be made within 1 year of the incident that you are complaining about. Even if it's more than 1 year, still bring it to your EEO team, your EEO officer's attention, my attention. So that this particular clause right here may not always apply depending on the circumstance. So just bring that to our attention regardless. You can file a complaint anonymously by calling or writing the EEO officer. If you request your identity be concealed, the EEO professional investigating the complaint will attempt not to reveal it. So your EEO complaint can be filed against anyone and everyone. The list here is not exhaustive. So it can be an intern that you submit your complaint against. It can be a volunteer. It can be, as mentioned, an independent contractor. So maybe your office hired a company to do repairs in the office, and they're not your direct colleague, but they're in that workplace. You can still submit a complaint to us, your EEO team. In the chance that you want to remain anonymous in your complaint, we will do our very best to conceal your identity throughout the investigative process. However, I do want to note that it's not a guarantee, unfortunately. Sometimes, depending on the circumstance, people can either just by their own deductions come to the conclusion of who filed the report, or sometimes it is frankly impossible to keep that identity withheld, especially if the person filing the complaint is the one directly involved. So we do our best if requested to conceal the identity, but unfortunately, just by nature of EEO investigations and trying to get a solid understanding of what may have happened, that is not something that can always be upheld. But you can always request. So where else can you file a complaint? So you can always file a complaint externally with one of the civil rights enforcement agencies. So these are a list of other agencies that you can submit an EEO complaint to. So for whatever reason, if everyone on your EEO team, myself, Maite, all of HR is on vacation for whatever reason, and it is just impossible to submit this complaint, you can always reach out to any of these agencies to submit a complaint. And even if we are present and available, if you prefer, you can always go to any of these agencies to submit your EEO complaint. I do want to note, you cannot submit two concurrent complaints. So if you submit a complaint to, me, Xavier, your EEO officer, and then you go to, for example, the New York City Commission on Human Rights, we would have to cease our investigation, and the Commission on Human Rights will conduct their own investigation. So only one of these agencies can conduct an investigation at a time. But the process, regardless of the agency, is equally thorough for all of them. So it is just up to your preference and level of comfort of who you would like to submit your EEO complaint to. So all complaints, investigations, requests for reasonable accommodations, and records will be handled to the greatest extent possible in a manner that will protect the privacy interest of those involved. So these conversations that you have regarding your EEO question, your EEO complaint, your reasonable accommodation question, your reasonable accommodation complaint remains confidential. We don't discuss this with our direct supervisors. To be so that you guys understand how important confidentiality is with us, even my direct supervisor, who I consult to for EEO matters, does not get specific details on cases. So if you come to me with a particular case and maybe there's something I'm unsure about and I need to consult my supervisor about the case that you're bringing to my attention, I will not reveal your identity to that person. It is just the necessary details so that I have my question answered. But as far as who you are, who you're making the complaint against, where you work, those specific identifying details remain confidential. All right, and here is a list of your EEO team and how we can be contacted. So I am here, your EEO officer, Xavier. We have our deputy EEO officer, Maite Carino, your disability rights coordinator, Kimberly James. Just an important note for everyone, should you want to submit a reasonable accommodation request, that is who you would go to, Kimberly James, your disability rights coordinator.
Hi, Xavier.
Yes.
The slide with the info did not forward for some
Oh,
reason.
okay. It looks like I'm maybe having some sort of technical issue. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to reshare.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, how does that look for everyone?
We see it now. Thank you. Great,
thank you. Yes, so this is the list of everyone in our EEO team. This is how you can contact us. You can always reach out to me, whether it's by my office phone, which is in my email signature, or my direct line, which is included here. Excuse me. If you can also reach out to our deputy, either by email or by the line included here. This information is also included in our EEO policy files. So should that EEO policy that's sent out to everyone also has the contact information for your EEO team. And that is that's the presentation. That is an overview of our EEO policy that discusses, what a protected class is and how to identify if you're being treated potentially differently based off of a protected class, how to file a complaint and what that complaint process looks like. And if there are any questions, Porfirio, let me know. I'm here to answer.
I'm looking in the Q&A. I don't really see anything right now. I'll give it another moment. But thank you so much, Xavier, for the presentation. The comments are that it was very concise and thorough. Thank you. So that was one of the comments.
Thank you.
And you're getting a lot of likes and hands. And so, yeah. So, well, let me take the moment, first of all, to say thank you. I know it's something that we don't always want to deal with or think about, but it's important to our office to share this information. Xavier, we thank you for taking the time to do this. I want to shout out again to my director, Eric Cuello, for all the support. And I would not be able to do any of this without Dawn Billings, our admin at the Office for the Manhattan Board President.
I do see we have a raised hand.
Let's give me 1 second. Okay, so there's a question about I'm answering Tammy Metzer's question, which is, can we please get acknowledgement that the training was taken by board chairs? Our training is separate from the training that is required by DCAS. However, for our sake and at the Manhattan Board President's Office, anyone who is here presently on this, we have your name and we also have your email. So we know that you have taken this. It will also live on our YouTube channel beginning next week, and it will be up through the end of December 31st. When reapplications happen for hours, we use the honor system when you answer the questions. Have you ever taken any of the training sessions? A couple of questions.
Just a bit of additional context to that. In case you're referencing specifically the audits that are happening for our community boards, and providing some sort of evidence that you have been trained in the EEO policy, just forward that over to me, and then we can discuss further on how we can provide evidence that the chairs are trained in the EEO policy if your question was related to the audits that are happening. And Porfirio, I see we have a couple of other hands raised as well.
Yeah, that was Tammy again, and so you just answered that question. So it would be referred to Xavier, and then Xavier would follow up for confirmation. Any other questions? Okay. I don't see anything else.
We have
Everything else is
Teresa
just.
Coles, who's raised her hand.
Let's go and see what's there. Okay, I'm gonna Paul, I'm gonna promote you up to ask you a question. Okay, Paul declined. If you want to put your questions in the chat, you can put the questions in the chat.
Okay, and then
I mean, in the correction, in the Q&A, Teresa, I believe, has a question. I'll promote her to panelist so that she can ask a question. Okay, I've tried to open it. There you go. You have the ability now to unmute and ask your question. Teresa. Teresa, you need to unmute and then you can ask your question.
Or if it's easier, you can always type your question in the Q&A if you're having technical issues.
Okay.
You're unmuted now, Teresa.
I didn't have a question.
Okay, thank you. Xavier, there is a question. Can you please put the slide up that has the information for contact?
Yes. Just, can you confirm that you guys see that slide change?
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. So this would be a great opportunity to take a picture and keep this information on file on your phone. Are there any further questions? All right. Seeing none, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Again, thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Xavier. And thank all of you for taking this afternoon to be with us. And as promised, we said we would keep it under the hour. Again, these will live on our YouTube channel, which is the Manhattan Borough President's Office YouTube channel, through December 31st. Thank you. I'm going to give you the rest of your evening back.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day.